Hello and welcome back to the channel and the first build video of 2024. My name is Nathan and today I will be presenting D&D build number 13, a build I am entitling the Ranger of the Depths. So this is kind of a magical archer type build, but we're not actually going to be a ranger and it's not going to be exactly the most straightforward. But overall this is going to be a very fun, very powerful bit of mix of magic and archery. And it's actually going to be based on a template of a build I made all the way back on the very first build on the channel, my Fiend Knight build, which will be up over in the right corner if you want to check that out. So, some other names ideas I have had for names in this build, maybe the Wave Warden, or the Tentacle Archer, or the Forceful Lightning Kraken. But ultimately, I arrived on the Ranger of the Depths, so I think it's a good kind of summary of what this build and this character is. So, here is our agenda for today. I'll kind of introduce and talk about the concept of the build and the character. Then I'll talk about level 1, levels 2 through 6, levels 7 through 9, levels 10 through 13, and 14 through 17 before summarizing. And at each of our key kind of thresholds, so level 6, level 9, level 13, and level 17, I will give a damage report and kind of talk about the kind of damage this character is going to be outputting and what kind of their tactics are going to be. Importantly, this is going to be a burst damage or Nova damage character, and I'm gonna kind of compare and talk about it in comparison to some of my other characters of that type. So let's jump in. Build concept. So this is a burst damage focused magical archer. We're going to sacrifice a little bit of our burst potential in exchange for better control and damage per round options, as well as potential burst and area of effect blasting type of things. This character in particular would go quite well in an aquatic campaign or setting, though that's not required at all. This character is naturally going to be very comfortable in and around water due to a lot of their class features. And so if you're going to be playing a campaign that has that, this is a good way to do that. Additionally, this build design will also provide a solid foundation for role-playing. I think the story of this multiclass character is going to be quite compelling, and is something that should be pretty easy to pull off and should make for an interesting backstory to explore at the table with your dungeon master. Additionally, this is a bladelock build, so a warlock with Pact of the Blade that is not going to be using a crossbow expert or hexblade. While you could make a version of this character that uses those, one of the things I want to do in particular for this build is not do that, because the subclass I want to use is obviously not a hexblade, and I think if you constrain yourself to only doing bladelocks with hexblade, you're missing out on a lot of the fun and cool things that you can do. So the books you will need for this build, you will need the Player's Handbook, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. Yeah, we're doing a relatively simple 3-book build today. There are some additional spells out of other books that you could take if the DM allows them, but none of the core features of this build will come from anything other than these 3 books. So at level 1, we are starting with Fighter. And if you've seen my very first build, the Fiend Knight, which I linked a little while ago, there's a very solid reason for why we are starting Fighter here. So as a first level fighter, we get proficiency with all armor and shields, as well as simple and martial weapons. We get proficiency in strength saves and constitution saves, which will actually be pretty nice for us to maintain our concentration on spells. And as a first level fighter, we also get our choice of our fighting style. We're going to take archery here for that +2 to hit with all ranged weapons. And we get the second wind feature, which once per short rest lets us use a bonus action to recover a number of hit points equal to a D10 roll plus our fighter level. And we're never going to be a very high level fighter on this character, but that heal is not insignificant, and it's almost like a free healing potion and that kind of thing. So, as for our race today, I am going back to Variant Human, which is again the same race I used on my first Bladelock build on the channel. And as a Variant Human, we get an extra skill proficiency. Again, take what you want here based on how you envision the story of your character. And we get a free feat, and I'm going to take the Sharpshooter feat here. Now, what this does is it means we ignore any penalties for attacking at beyond our normal range. So, if we're attacking at long range, we won't have disadvantage. And we can also choose to take a -5 penalty to our attack rolls with ranged weapons to get a +10 damage bonus to damage rolls. And we also get to ignore up like half quarter and 3/4 cover, and we can snipe people through those arrow slits in the walls and that kind of thing. This is a very powerful damage feat for ranged characters and works particularly well with the archery fighting style. And because this build is going to be mostly a Warlock, we are not going to get access to very many feats, and so getting an extra feat from our race is going to be essential. Now, if you don't want to use Variant Human, you can absolutely use Custom Lineage, or if your campaign allows a free feat at level 1, then you can just take Sharpshooter here and use a different race. But for the sake of this build, we are going to be going with the Variant Human. Now, kind of the story I envision with this character, at the beginning of our career, we are, a veteran hunter. Perhaps we lived near the coast. Perhaps we were even an archer in a war. But something has happened to us in the relatively recent past where maybe we survived being almost drowned, or we were thrown off of a ship, or maybe we just have dreams about tentacles. But whatever that backstory is, it's going to be kind of come critical into what our multi-classing is going to be to actually make us a Warlock. But for most of our career, at least class-wise, up until the point of our character creation, we are a fighter. As for our skills, our stats, I'm doing point buy as always, and I'm going to be getting a 15 in dexterity, putting one of our racial +1s there, a 14 in constitution, a 10 in wisdom, and a 15 in charisma, putting our other +1 there. As a fighter, we start with a number of hit points equal to 10 plus our constitution modifier, so we'll start with 12 health. As for our starting equipment, I want to take the items offered by our class here. So we get leather armor, we get a longbow and 20 arrows, we get a rapier and a shield as well, because we can take a martial weapon and a shield. And I would try to use some of your starting gold to potentially acquire a component pouch during your early adventures. And long term, you're going to want to aim for probably the best medium armor or light armor that you can get. We will eventually cap dexterity, and we're proficient with both of these, so feel free to use either one. And obviously a magical longbow of some kind. Ideally, you'll get a magic longbow that has something to do with your patron, which we will talk about coming up very quickly here. So at level 2, we are going to be taking our first level into Warlock, and all Warlocks can get their subclass, their otherworldly patron, at level 1, and we are going with the Fathomless patron out of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So the Fathomless patron, I kind of envision this as, maybe it was your patron that helped you survive that near drowning, or your patron has been giving you those tentacle dreams, or whatever it's going to be. But as a Fathomless Warlock, we get an expanded spell list, so there's a couple additional spells that are added to our options that we can pick. Those for the Fathomless Warlock are Create or Destroy Water and Thunder Wave at level 1, Gust of Wind and Silence at spell level 2. At spell level 3, they get Lightning Bolt and Sleet Storm. At spell level 4, they get Control Water and Summon Elemental, although they can only pick Water Elemental. At level 5, they get Big Beast Hand and Cone of Cold added to the list of spells that they can take. They also get the Tentacle of the Deeps feature, and this is a really cool one. With a bonus action, you can magically summon this spectral tentacle. And when you summon it, you can slap an enemy within 10 feet of the tentacle, and it does a d8 of cold damage, and their speed is reduced by 10 feet. And the tentacle lasts for a minute, and on future turns you can use a bonus action to move it up to 30 feet and repeat the attack. And we can summon the tentacle a number of times per long rest equal to our proficiency bonus. We also get Gift of the Sea here, which gives us a swimming speed of 40 feet and the ability to breathe underwater. So, if we almost drowned before, now we can't drown because we can always breathe underwater. And this is one of those features that makes this character really good in that kind of aquatic type campaign setting. Now, as a first level Warlock, we also get Pact Magic here, which is the Warlock's version of spellcasting. We have a limited number of spell slots that are all the same level, but they all come back on a short rest. We get to know 2 cantrips here, and the main one that we want on this build is going to be Eldritch Blast, and you can take a second one of your choice. I would probably take Mage Hand, and perhaps your Mage Hand appears as a tentacle. So you've got your Tentacle of the Deeps tentacle and your Mage Hand tentacle. There's going to be a lot of tentacles on this build, potentially. As a first level Warlock, we have 1 first level spell slot, and we get to know 2 spells. I honestly probably wouldn't take any of the spells off your expanded list here, and I would just take Hex and Armor of Agathis. Now, a cool thing about the Tentacle of the Deeps, you make a melee spell attack with it, and so your Tentacle of the Deeps potentially could benefit from extra damage from the Hex spell. Although they are both bonus actions, it might take a while to set up, and there is a little awkwardness there, but it is potentially an option. Now, at level 3, we are a Warlock level 2. This means we now get our second spell slot of first level, and we get to add another first level spell of our choice. I would probably take Thunderwave off of the of our expanded Warlock list here, just to give us kind of that ability to shove people backward and away from us, because we're going to be a ranged character. At this point, we're probably using our longbow, and starting with the fighter gave us proficiency with the longbow, which is something that's really important. And we also get our Eldritch Invocations here, and we get 2 of them. Now, for Warlocks, what these are is they're basically like these whole bunch of different features that you can pick from to kind of customize your class. And these kind of make Warlocks into a bit of a Swiss Army knife. And we can swap these out whenever we gain a level, just like how we can retrain our spells whenever, well, one of our spells every time we gain a level. And so the 2 I want to take here are Agonizing Blast. What this does is it lets you add your Charisma modifier to the damage rolls of your Eldritch Blast. So that'll be nice. Our Eldritch Blast at this point would actually do more damage, although be less likely to hit than our bow. So we're probably still using the bow here. And then I would take Devil's Sight. What this does is it lets you see in darkness, both magical and non-magical, out to a range of 120 feet. Now, as a human, we don't have dark vision, so this will cover that, and it also lets us see in magical darkness, which is going to become really important at our next level. So, at level 4, we are a Warlock 3, and we get our Pact Boon. I'm going to go with Pact of the Blade. This is it basically lets us summon our Pact weapon and that kind of thing, and it has to be a melee weapon at this point. And this doesn't really do anything for us here, but it is a prerequisite for a lot of the invocations we want to take later to kind of customize our class. Level of our spell slots increases to level 2 here, and we get our first second level spell, and we are going to take the Darkness spell. Now, if you don't know about this particular combination between the Darkness spell and Devil's Sight, I'll explain it real quick. So Darkness creates a 15-foot radius sphere of magical darkness, and if you attach it to an object, it'll move with it. So you can potentially cast this spell on yourself and create a bubble of darkness around you. Now, importantly, normal dark vision can't see through this bubble of darkness, but the dark vision from the Devil's Sight invocation can. So what this does is your enemies won't be able to see you because you're surrounded by this darkness, but you will be able to see them because you can see through the darkness with Devil's Sight. So this will give you advantage on your attack rolls against them, and also will give them disadvantage on their attack rolls to attack you. Importantly, the way this works with the Tentacle of the Deep, because you are the one making the melee spell attack with the tentacle, that attack would have advantage if you were in the darkness because they couldn't see you, even if they could see the tentacle. Them being able to see the tentacle doesn't matter because you're the one making the attack. So this is going to become the kind of core of our strategy. From here on out, at least for a while, is we're going to use the Darkness and Devil's Sight combination to give ourselves advantage on our attacks. Now, because we are going to be a ranged character, we want to make sure that we're not standing too close to any of our allies so that they're also in the darkness, unless they also are Warlocks with Devil's Sight or acquire the Devil's Sight invocation through a feat, because then they wouldn't be able to see. And so this is a combination that's a lot easier to get away with if you are a ranged character than a melee character, because you'd have to run up to the enemies and potentially, make it so your allies can't see the enemies, and we don't really want that. So we're using this combination to get advantage for ourselves, but be aware and cognizant of your use of it, especially in enclosed areas like rooms. Now, at level 5, we are going to be a Warlock 4. We get to learn another cantrip here. I would pick whatever you want. I'd probably take Minor Illusion on my character for kind of how I view the concept of this. Maybe you create illusions of tentacles, and now we have tentacles, and more tentacles. We also get to learn another second level spell here, and I would learn Misty Step. Now, We also get our first ability score increase or feat here, and I'm actually going to take the Meta Magic Adept feat here immediately. And this is out of Tasha's. What this does is it gives you, it has a prerequisite of having the spellcasting or pact magic feature, and we can obviously do this because we're a warlock. This gives us 2 sorcery points that come back on a short rest, and then we also get to learn 2 meta magic spells of our choice off of the sorcerer list. We're going to pick Quicken Spell, which lets us, it costs 2 sorcery points and lets us change the casting time of one of our spells from an action to a bonus action. And I'm also going to take Subtle Spell, which lets us spend 1 of our sorcery points to cast a spell without any verbal or somatic components. Now, you can, for the second one, you can take whatever you want, but Quicken Spell is going to be kind of the core of our burst kind of options. Importantly, at level 5, the power of our cantrips also goes up here, so Eldritch Blast goes from 1 beam to 2 beams. The reason that we've kept the Agonizing Blast invocation is at this level, you're probably going to switch to Eldritch Blasting instead of using your longbow, at least temporarily. So, at level 6, we are going to be a Warlock 5. Now, the level of our spell slots increases from 2nd level to 3rd level, and we get to learn another spell, and I'm going to learn the Lightning Bolt spell. Now, this is a spell that most Warlocks don't get access to, but we get access to because it's on our Fathomless expanded spell list. I would also retrain the Hex spell here into Spirit Shroud. Now, this is a 3rd level spell, again, out of Tasha's. It creates a 10-foot area around you, and you get to add a 1d8 to all of your attacks, whether they're with a weapon or a spell, against all creatures within that area, and you also get to slow one of them down by 10 feet. And the damage type of that extra d8 can be cold, radiant, or necrotic, and this spell adds a d8 to that extra damage per attack for every 2 levels you upcast it at. This is more powerful than Spirit Shroud in terms of Hex, and because it's 1d8 versus 1d6, but it also saves you some bonus action economy in that you don't have to spend a bonus action to transfer the Hex, so I would do the retrain here. The disadvantage of this spell is that it requires you to be within 10 feet of your targets, but it is a little bit more damage, and it's a good option to have. Now, we're not going to be using this spell just yet, but later on we're going to be planning on using it. Now, as for our invocations, we get another invocation here, and I'm going to take the Thirsting Blade invocation. What this does is it lets you make when you take the attack action and attack with your pact weapon, you can attack twice instead of once, and this doesn't stack with other sources of extra attack. Now, here's a problem though. We can't actually use our longbow as our pact weapon because it's not a melee weapon, and this doesn't qualify. So we're going to use our level up to swap out our Agonizing Blast invocation for the improved pact weapon invocation. What this does is it lets you use a longbow or a short bow or a heavy crossbow and that kind of thing as your pact weapon. And it also lets you use your pact weapon as a spellcasting focus and gives your pact weapon a +1 to attack rolls and damage rolls if it doesn't have it already. So by having both of these invocations, we can now make 2 attacks with our longbow. So all that's done, we've got the Lightning Bolt spell, we've got Quicken Spell, and it is time for our first damage report here at level 6. So what do our tactics look like here at this level? So in the first round, we're going to cast Darkness on ourselves with one of our spell slots, and we're probably going to activate our Tentacle of the Deeps and slap an enemy and slow them down. Then any point at round 2 and beyond, we're going to pop off for our burst round. So we're going to attack twice with our longbow, and then we're going to quicken the Lightning Bolt spell. So if you kind of imagine this, our Ranger of the Deeps, our archer, vanishes in a cloud of darkness, and then out of the darkness flies a couple arrows and a big blast of lightning. You might flavor that Lightning Bolt even as you drawing back your bow, and instead of firing an arrow, you unleash that bolt of lightning. However, you want to do that, and I think that would probably be a pretty cool way to say that you're casting the spell, especially because our longbow is now our spellcasting focus. Now, once we've done our burst round, we still have our Tentacle of the Deeps up, so we've got a pretty good amount of damage per round that we can do between our 2 longbow attacks as well as our tentacle attack. So what kind of are our dice and that kind of thing on this damage? Well, we've got 2 longbow attacks that we're going to use our sharpshooter on. We have a +4 to hit after all bonuses and penalties because we've got the archery fighting style, as well as the sharpshooter -5, but we do have advantage on all these attacks, assuming the enemies can't see through our magical darkness. Each of these longbow attacks will do 1d8 plus 14 piercing damage, and then we have our spell save DC at this level is 14, and we'll fire off that 8d6 lightning damage lightning bolt. Importantly, even if the enemies do save, they'll still take half damage, and you can potentially hit more than one enemy with this. And the damage numbers I'm showing here are just the damage a single target will take. So, against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 58.7 damage. And against an enemy with an armor class of 15 and +5 to their saves, we would do 48.2 damage. And this is honestly pretty good. But that said, compared to all the other burst characters I've done to date, this is actually the worst damage I've had of any of them at this level. And it's not very close. Some of that is because a lot of those other builds are mostly fighters at this level and already have action surge, which is a pretty big deal to help out. Or they have some other additional things that they are doing. But that said, these damage numbers are not bad by any means, and I think this character would be very fun to play and fully functional even at this point. But at level 7, we are going back to fighter just for a little bit, and at level 2, fighters get action surge. So what this does is once per short rest, this lets us take an extra action on our turn, and with all the benefits thereof. So if we attack again, we will get to make 2 attacks because of our Thirsting Blade invocation. And this is just a great thing to have in terms of burst damage, and honestly, it's probably why I think just about every burst build I will ever make will have at least 2 fighter levels, because this action surge feature is so good. Another cool thing about this is that our character is pretty good in terms of their rest economy, because they get back almost all of their resources on a short rest. So you get back all your spell slots and your action surge. Unfortunately, you don't get back those sorcery points for our quicken spell. But for the most part, we are pretty good on a short rest. Now, at level 8, we are a 3rd level fighter, and we get our martial archetype, our subclass, and we are getting the Battlemaster subclass. So the core thing that Battlemasters get is combat superiority. And we get 4 superiority dice, which are a d8, and we can use them to fuel our maneuvers, which we get to learn 3. So the 3 I would take on this character, for sure I would take precision attack. This lets you, after you roll the dice, and after you see it, but before the DM says whether it hits or misses, you can roll a d8 and add it to your attack roll. So you can use this for things that are close that you think might miss, and this kind of helps out cancel out the penalty of sharpshooter. The other ones that you take doesn't really matter. You just want to make sure you take things that can do damage. So the ones I would take here are menacing attack and pushing attack. What menacing attack does is after we hit, we can roll our d8 and add it to the damage. And then the enemy has to make a save against our maneuver DC. So our maneuver DC is 8 plus our proficiency plus our strength or dexterity modifier, whichever is higher. So in this character, we'll use our dexterity modifier. And if they fail that save, they'll be frightened of us. So importantly, if they're frightened of us, they have disadvantage on attack rolls as long as they can see us, which they might not actually be able to do if we're enshrouded in darkness. But the cool thing is they can't willingly move closer to us. So you can use this to keep an enemy at distance so they can't close on you. I would also take pushing attack here. This again has that same damage bonus. You get to add the damage that you roll, and also forces them to make a save. And if they fail, you can push them, and you can use this to yeet enemies off cliffs or into obstacles or each other. And I just think this is a really fun thing to have on a ranged character. We also get the Student of War feature here, which gives us proficiency with a set of artisans tools. I would pick whatever you want, whatever fits your flavor and backstory best. And I kind of envision this as we've gotten a little bit more magic, and we're kind of, as we've been progressing, we've been getting better and better at our fighter-y things, shooting our bow and that kind of thing. But at level 9, we're going back to Warlock, and we will stay with Warlock the rest of the way. So as a Warlock 6, we get some features from our subclass. So Fathomless Warlocks get Oceanic Soul and Guardian Coil. What Oceanic Soul does is it gives us resistance to cold damage, and then while we are fully submerged in water, any creature that is also fully submerged, we can understand their speech and they can understand ours. So this lets you, if you dunk yourself and somebody else underwater, you can talk with each other even you don't know any languages. And it also lets you talk underwater, which normally you can't do. You can even talk to underwater creatures with this potentially if they have a language. And then what Guardian Coil does is when ourselves or a creature we can see takes damage while within 10 feet of our Tentacle of the Deeps, we can use our reaction to intercept the attack and reduce the damage by 1d8. And this is a nice thing to have for our reaction. We don't really have much else to use, although we could. And so this gives us a way to protect ourselves or our allies depending on how we position our Guardian Coil. Now we also get to learn another spell here, and honestly, pick your favorite, pick whatever you want. Something like Counterspell or Fly could be good here. There's a lot of good spells on the Warlock list at level 3, but there's nothing that we're really planning on using for our burst damage. So pick whatever you feel would fit your character best and just kind of how your campaign is going. Now, at level 9, it is time for our second damage report. So what has changed? What have we gained since last time? So we've gained Action Surge, we've gained Superiority Dice and Maneuvers, as well as the nice utility and features of the Oceanic Soul and the Guardian Coil. So in terms of our tactics, what do those look like now? So in the first round, we're still casting Darkness on ourselves and activating our Tentacle of the Deep. But in our second round, we're attacking twice with our longbow. We're going to Action Surge and attack twice again. And then we're going to quicken out our lightning bolt, but we're going to use our superiority dice on all of our attacks. If it looks like your attack is going to hit, you should plan on using your superiority dice to do damage with either menacing attack or pushing attack. But if it looks like it's going to miss and you're going to be close, I would use it on precision attack. Now, mathematically, what looks better is always assuming that you're going to be doing it for damage, but I understand in a real game, it's going to be a flip-flop, and the fact that you get to decide after what you see your roll is, it just makes it really nice, and you'll probably actually do a little bit better damage than the numbers I will show because of that. Now, after we've popped off on our burst round, we still can attack twice with advantage with our longbow and attack with our tentacle, again with advantage because we're in darkness and they can't see us after that. So even though, we have pretty good burst damage at this point, we have pretty good sustained damage thanks to our longbow and tentacle, and we have that extra control there. So what is our damage like now? Well, we have 4 longbow attacks instead of 2. We have +5 to hit with advantage thanks to the increase in our proficiency. And each of these is going to do 2d8 plus 14 piercing damage. And our lightning bolt, our save DC has gone up, but it still does the same amount of damage. So against a target with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 115.6 damage. And against an enemy with an armor class of 16 and +6 to their saves, it would be 92 damage. And since last time, this is an increase of over 90% in both cases. We have almost doubled our damage, and this is largely due to that Action Surge giving us all of those extra attacks. Now, importantly here, how are we doing compared to other builds at this point? We are doing okay. We have outpaced my dedicated control builds, and we are doing better than any of my we're doing better than my Warlord build, as well as doing better than my Stormborn build, which is kind of my Tempest Cleric caster. But other than that, we are still kind of behind everybody else. But we do have that area of effect damage potential because we have Lightning Bolt, and we have a little bit kind of better control and damage per round and utility than those builds. Now, at level 10, we are going to be a Warlock 7, and this means our spell slots increase in level from 3rd level to 4th level. And importantly here, I would learn the Sickening Radiant spell. We're probably not going to be using this for a long time, but there's a specific combo that I want it for later that I've used on a lot of builds, so I'm going to learn that here. But if you want to delay the spell and not even take it, that would be totally understandable. And also at this level, I would retrain the Darkness spell into Shadow of Moil. This is a spell out of Xanathar's. It takes a bonus action to cast, and it heavily obscures you, as well as kind of gives you a fire shield-like defense effect. Now, the important thing here is that you still have the fact that enemies can't see you if you're heavily obscured, so you still get advantage, but it doesn't create that bubble of darkness that's a problem for all of your allies. and I would probably plan on using this spell instead of darkness from here on out. And that said, darkness still has some situational uses, and I would understand if you wanted to keep it, but I would at least learn Shadow of Moil here, whether it's from retraining or something else. We also get another invocation here, and we're going to get back Agonizing Blast. Now, we're probably still better off making attacks with our longbow, even after Agonizing Blast improves next level. But we're going to want this for our next damage report, and I will explain why then. So at level 11, we are going to be a Warlock 8, and we get our second ability score increase or feat, and I'm going to take this chance to bump my dexterity up to 18. As a level 11 character, the power of our cantrips also goes up, so Eldritch Blast will fire 3 beams now. And then we get to learn another spell of our choice, and again, honestly, pick your favorite. There's a lot of fun spells out there. I might pick up, Summon Elemental off of the class list here, or Control Water if you're in a, kind of seafaring campaign. But there isn't anything that we really want to use in our burst round, so pick whatever you want and whatever fits your character and concept best. Now, at level 12, we are going to be a Warlock 9, and this means that we get another invocation, as well as our spell slots go up from 4th level to 5th level. And we also can learn 5th level spells here. And again, I'm going to recommend picking your favorite. There are a lot of powerful 5th level spells here, but nothing that we're going to be planning on using in our burst round. Some of my favorites are things like Synaptic Static out of Tasha's, or Bigby's Hand, which is a spell that normally is exclusive to wizards, but the Fathomless Warlock can learn, and guess what? It's a tentacle for you. So lots and lots of tentacles, or maybe even the Hold Monster spell. So again, pick what you want and whatever fits your character best. Now for our invocations, right in time for our max level spell slots, we're going to take Eldritch Smite. And what this does is, on our turn, once per turn, when we hit with an attack, a weapon attack specifically, it doesn't have to be a melee weapon, it can be a melee or ranged weapon, we can expend one of our spell slots to deal force damage equal to 1d8 plus an additional d8 per level of the spell, and we can knock the target prone if it's huge or smaller if we want to. So basically what this does is it lets us spend one of our spell slots to do an additional 6d8 force damage. So I'm going to be planning on using this instead of our lightning bolt for our other spell slot. And what are we going to quicken? We're going to quicken Eldritch Blast, but we will get to that after our level 13 features. So at level 13, we are a Warlock 10, and we get to learn another 5th level spell here. Pick whatever you want, and we also get some features from the Fathomless, and this is actually a big bump. So the first thing that we get is we get the Grasping Tentacles feature. And what this does is it gives us the Ivard's Black Spell Tentacles that we learn. It counts as a Warlock spell for us, but doesn't count against the number of Warlock spells that we know. And we can cast it once without a spell slot, and we regain the ability to do so whenever we finish a long rest. And when we cast this spell, our patron's magic kind of infuses us, and we get a number of temporary hit points equal to our Warlock level. So at this level, that would be 10. And then importantly, damage can't break our concentration on Ivard's Black Tentacles. So even though we're proficient in Constitution saves, this is something that is always up. And this is a really good kind of control option to have in your back pocket. I'm not going to be planning on using this for any of our burst round, but something you could potentially do with this is lay this down on a group of enemies. If you can't fit everybody in, you can use your pushing attacks with your maneuvers to push them in, and you can use this to kind of control and lock down even the most dangerous enemies, assuming they fail their save. Also, the damage of our Tentacle of the Deep increases from 1d8 cold to 2d8 cold, and the damage reduction of our Guardian Coil also increases to 2d8 here. So that our Tentacle is very nice to have around at this level. But at level 13, it is time for our next damage report. So what has changed for our Ranger of the Deeps, or the Depths, since last time? Well, we've gained 5th level spell slots, which we can apply with Eldritch Smite. We've gained Agonizing Blast, and our Eldritch Blast is scaled up to 3 beams. And we've also gained additional 2 points of dexterity for a total of 18. We've also got some really nice improvements to our Tentacle of the Deeps, and some really nice expanded control spell options. So what do our tactics look like now? Well, it's actually advantageous here to switch our concentration spell from Darkness / Shadow of Moil to Spirit Shroud. Now, importantly, this requires you to be within 10 feet of your target, which is not going to be as safe for you. So in a real game, it might be better in a lot of combat cases to just use Shadow of Moil to keep yourself at distance and stay evasive. But in terms of the raw damage that we're going to output, sacrificing advantage for additional damage dice at this level with the volume of attacks is actually going to be better. So our tactics are going to be in the first round to cast Spirit Shroud on ourselves. It's going to be at level 5 because that's the level of our spell slots, which means it's going to add 2d8 damage of either cold, radiant, or necrotic to all of our attacks, whether they're spells or weapon attacks. And then we'll probably attack a couple times with our longbow. Now, anytime after that, in the second round or beyond, we're going to attack twice with our longbow, we're going to action surge, attack twice again, and then we're going to quicken Eldritch Blast. We're going to burn our superiority dice on all of our attacks. At this level, the mathematical best thing to do is to use them on precision attack because we no longer have advantage. But again, if you think your attack roll is, if you think or know your attack roll is going to hit, you should use them for damage instead. And then we're going to apply Eldritch Smite on one of our attacks. You can save it for a crit, but whatever you do, this is going to be a big punch of damage here. So what are our dice and kind of our numbers? So we've got 4 attacks with our longbow, and mathematically the best thing to do is to use sharpshooter with precision attack. We have +7 plus 1d8 to hit, and each of these attacks will do 1d8 plus 15 piercing damage, and an additional 2d8 cold, radiant, or necrotic. We also have 3 Eldritch Blasts off our bonus action that we have a +8 to hit, each doing 1d10 plus 3 force damage and an additional 2d8 of whatever damage our Spirit Shroud is. We also have our Eldritch Smite for 68 force damage that'll ride on one of our longbow attacks. So, against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would be doing 190.4 damage here. And against an enemy with an armor class of 17 and +7 to their saves, we would do 147 damage in our burst round. Now, since last time, that's an increase of 60 to 65% depending on the enemy armor class. And at this point, we are actually doing relatively well. We are still, behind a lot of our builds, but we have passed actually both of my baseline fighter builds for burst damage at this point, and that's something that I'm pretty happy about. Again, this burst damage is not bad, and we have pretty good sustained damage and control after our burst round with our Tentacle of the Deeps, and we also have a lot of cool kind of blasting and control options to go with our ability to go Nova. So at level 14, we are going to be a Warlock 11, and importantly, we now have 3 5th level spell slots at this point. And this is a wonderful bump, just that ability to get those extra spells. We don't get to learn any new spells here, but retrain as you need. And we get our first Mystic Arcanum feature here. So this is something that Warlocks get instead of higher level spell slots. You basically get to pick a spell of, in this case, 6th level, and we can cast it once per long rest. And honestly, pick your favorite, pick whatever you want. I would probably take Mass Suggestion on my character, but something like one of the Investor spells out of, I believe, Xanathar's that kind of let you ascend into this other form might be really fun. Those do require concentration, but pick whatever you want and what fits your character and campaign best. At level 15, we are going to be a Warlock 12, and we get our next ability score increase our feat, and I'm going to take advantage of this to bump my dexterity to 20 and cap it. We also get our next invocation here, and I'm going to take the Life Drinker invocation. What this does is it lets us add our charisma modifier to our damage rolls with our pact weapon. So this gives us an additional +3 damage with all of our longbow attacks, and that is great. As for our spells, continue to retrain as you need. At level 16, we are a Warlock 13, and we get our 7th level Mystic Arcanum. And again, pick whatever you want, but on my character, I would take the Force Cage spell. This is a very powerful control spell that doesn't require concentration and basically locks an enemy or enemies inside of a cage of force. The particular combo that I really want here is you cast Sickening Radiance and then Action Surge and Force Cage. And this is a kind of an instant checkmate against any enemy that can't block either of these spells and isn't immune to exhaustion. If that is the case, they will get trapped inside and they will get microwaved basically to death. Again, fun combo. I've used it on multiple other builds, including the Stormborn and the Fiend Knight. But just having access to that is something that is really fun and really cool. Finally, at level 17, we are going to be a Warlock 14, and this means we get our last feature out of the Fathomless, and this feature is called the Fathomless Plunge. What this does is, as an action, we can teleport ourselves and up to 5 willing creatures that we can see within 30 feet of us, and kind of a bunch of tentacles appear, and we all vanish and reappear up to 1 mile away in a body of water that we've seen, that's a pond or larger, or within 30 feet of said body of water. And each creature kind of appears within 30 feet of everybody else. And we can use this once per short or long rest. And this is a kind of a fun, just, maybe we escape combat, or maybe we need to go to a certain location or locale. And as far as capstones go, this isn't really very powerful, but I think it's fun and would be good to have. The reason I'm taking all the Warlock levels here is, again, just to scale into those higher level things. Importantly, the power of our cantrips goes up here, up to 4 beams with Eldritch Blast. So, it is time for our final damage report. So, what has changed since last time? Well, we've capped our dex at 20, we've gained a Life Drinker for that extra +3 damage to all of our longbow attacks, and Eldritch Blast is now up to 4 beams. We've also gained access to the Force Cage, not 4-Cage, Force Cage, plus Sickening Radiance combo, and we've gained some additional utility and control spells and features. So, since last time, our tactics haven't really changed. We're still using our Spirit Shroud, although Shadow of Moel is a good option and something you should highly consider. And we're, doing attacks, Action Surge attacks, Quicken Eldritch Blast, use all our superiority dice, and drop that Eldritch Smite. So, our damage here, we now have +9, +1d8 to hit, again, assuming precision attack, although use that or a damage one based on what you roll. Our hits now do 1d8 +19 piercing damage, thanks to our Life Drinker Invocation, and that additional 2d8 damage from our Spirit Shroud, since we can't, unfortunately, upcast that, because Mystic Arcanum is not spell slots. We also now have 4 Eldritch Blasts, again, doing the same amount of damage as before, and our Eldritch Smite is again the same amount of damage as before. So, against an enemy with an armor class of 10 and no bonus to their saves, we would do 223 damage in our burst round, and against an enemy with an armor class of 18 and +8 to their saves, we would do 178.4 damage. And since last time, this is an increase of about 20-ish%, not super significant because we haven't gotten a lot of bumps in terms of our raw damage. Compared to my other burst builds at this point, we are still ahead of all of my baseline fighter builds, which is great. We have, we passed the compound bow other archer build I did back at level 13 and are still ahead of them. And we are a little bit better than my Hedge Trimmer Nova build against an enemy with a low armor class. And I'm pretty pleased at where this character arrived in terms of their damage, especially given the amount of control and extra damage per round and support kind of things that this character also packs. So, it is time to summarize. So, what is the overall score of this character? Now, to get this, I take all of the numbers at all of our damage reports and I add them together and get an average. And so, for this character, that is a 131.7. In terms of my burst damage builds, this is actually bottom 4 if you count my support Warlord build as a burst damage build. It actually is worse overall than my baseline fighter builds, and that is just because of the strength of those builds at early levels. But this is by no means bad, and I think this character would be very fun to play in game just because of the amount of flexibility they have with their options. So if I was going to take this version of the build to level 20, I would probably do either Warlock 17 for the 9th level Mystic Arcanum, or I would do Warlock 16 Fighter 4 to get the extra ability score increase or feat. Now, those additional ability score increases are feats that I would get on the way to level 20. I would probably use them to bump my Charisma score to improve my spell save DC, as well as the damage of our Eldritch Blasts and our weapon attacks thanks to Life Drinker. Overall, again, this is a very well-rounded character with control options, options for AoE blasting, options for our burst and nova damage, as well as damage per round, and the ability to support ourselves and our allies with our Tentacle of the Deeps. That damage reduction is not nothing, and it could actually be pretty helpful to keep yourself or another key party member alive. One of the things I actually really like about this character is that positioning matters. Whether you're casting a lightning bolt and want to line it up on as many enemies as possible, or you're casting your Avard's Black Tentacles and pushing enemies into it with your pushing attack maneuver, or whether you're just pushing enemies off cliffs. This is going to be a character that's going to want to run around and move and not just stay as far away as possible, like a lot of range characters like to do. And that's something that I think would make this magical archer build in particular quite fun. It should be very important to mention that in a real game, I would probably be using Shadow of Moil or other concentration spells instead of Spirit Shroud. Because of the fact that Spirit Shroud requires us to get within 10 feet of our target, it might be a rather risky proposition to pull off with a ranged build that's going to be relatively squishy like this one. We don't have access to any defensive spells like Shield, and our armor class is going to be not the greatest because we don't carry a physical shield, and we have our dex modifier and not really much else. So I might consider using something like Bigby's Hand or Shadow of Moil and that kind of thing just to keep myself safe. But for the sake of our damage, I wanted to explore what was possible, and that's why we use Spirit Shroud in our later damage reports. Even if you're not going to be using Spirit Shroud, the damage of Eldritch Blast will very likely beat out other spells that you can quicken for a single target. But remember, you can quicken a Synaptic Static or a Lightning Bolt and just shred face on a lot of enemies if you can position correctly. Something else that it should be taken note about this build. This again was built on the same template as my Fiend Knight build. So this template is again Battlemaster Fighter 3, and honestly you can use any fighter subclass, and then 14 levels of your choice of Warlock that's not Hexblade. You can do Dexterity or Strength on these characters, just swap your Dexterity and Strength scores based on what you want to use. And overall, this is a really good template for building any Bladelock, whether they're ranged or melee, that isn't a Hexblade. Now you can use this same template on a Hexblade and be quite effective, and I really plan to do that on another character coming up. At some point in the future, I want to do that for another build. But just because I feel like Hexblade is so often used, I want to present you guys with things that are a little bit outside the box and not quite that. But I do want to talk briefly about maybe a Hexblade version of this build. Obviously, you're going to lose all of your tentacle things, but if you want to do a Hexblade Archer, you can either follow the 314 template like I just described, or you could do something like this. You could do 2 levels of Fighter for Action Surge and the Archery fighting style. You could do 12 levels of Hexblade Warlock to get you Life Drinker as well as your feats, and then potentially 3 levels of Sorcerer to get you Meta Magic and Quicken Spell. Now, one of the cool things that you can do on with this version of a build is you can convert your Warlock spell slots into sorcery points on a short rest. So if you have unspent Warlock spell slots, when you short rest, you can convert them into sorcery points, or you can just convert all of your spell slots out of sorcerer into sorcery points so you can burst more often. And this version of the build would be single attribute dependent in charisma because of the Hex Warrior feature out of Warlock, and overall could produce a very fun and powerful character, and I honestly want to try this at some point. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this take on another ranged Bladelock, my ranger of the depths. What did you like about this build? Have you tried a Bladelock? I personally really love designing Bladelocks and can't wait to play one for a character at some point in the future. So let me know what you thought down in the comments below. Again, my name is Nathan, and I will see you next time.